Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Mark, for the entertainment, and Frank and Bill. We've come out here purged and cleansed because going through 2 days of rain, we feel like we're new people coming out of the Midwest. Frank, Ferdy, and myself represent 215 years of association with the Turners. Ferdy waited till he was 14. Frank and I started a little earlier. I guess I was a couple of weeks old, but Frank tells me that he might have even been conceived there. So. And so when we considered Frank Barron's entreaties to bring the archives out here, we considered very seriously because having spent that much time, we didn't want to let something close to us leave easily. But we were concerned about, because they're being in German, first of all, but they're in German script, secondly, which makes it a little more difficult to read. And they're very tender after these years. Although I've got to give great compliments to those people who can't hear us now, but the founders for taking such good care of them. They, if you think of what many of us do with our current associations and how we take care of our minutes, and how these people went about. And if you can just consider when they had obviously less money than you'd think was available these days, and this is almost an early edition. This is only 1864. But the quality of the paper and the script and the clarity and the lack of errors and without spell check, it's absolutely amazing.
Typewriters, no computers.
Well, I don't want to repeat what you've heard, but maybe just fill in a couple of holes. We were, as Turners, go to Turn Fests every 4 years in the States. And we would go to different venues, and of course we went to Chicago for that purpose because they have many societies. Went to St. Louis several times for that purpose. Adams, Massachusetts, Aurora outside of Chicago, Louisville, all of that Turner societies, you know about the Kansas City one. There are probably 55 Turner societies that exist, but many of them really paper societies. 35 of them are probably active, with 10 to 12,000 members in the aggregate. The changes over time, where we had the heavy concentration on gymnastics, has given way. Americans are getting too tall, too heavy to do much work on balancing acts. What you see at the Olympic level now is a little difficult for people of greater size. And it's also one with a high degree of risk. Maybe not equivalent to skydiving or a few others, but for getting beat up, it may be equivalent to somebody who goes over a 30-foot diving board to do somersault. The Turners started in Cincinnati, although you heard that from Frank, that one started in New York City in 1848. But the Turners recognized as the Cincinnati as the first Turner Society, and the 1850 New York Society is the third. And did you take your stamp image?
Oh, sorry.
Crimson stamp. They try to get too much into that stamp, and I recall even as a youngster having to collect stamp, that it was voted as the least attractive stamp published by the Post Office in 1948. And the only runner up to it, if any of you are stamp collectors, was a hen without heritage that was in a brown shading that appeared in 1948. So, notwithstanding the lack of accolades it got, it was important to the Turners in 1948, representing the 100th anniversary. one of the things that I remember reading as a youngster, and I still see it to a lesser extent, is that whenever they talked about what the charter was of the Turners, they always included those things that always seemed to be rather remote, highfalutin kind of things, not something that somebody who's a gymnast was overly concerned about. Because they talked about child labor, they talked about equal rights for women, and the universal education, and the contribution, as you heard, is not the introduction out in Kansas physical education, but the Turners had what was a normal college, and that normal college varied where it was located. It was in New York for a while, it was in Chicago for a while. It then had a more permanent residence as normal college in Indianapolis. It many years ago became part of IUPU, Indianapolis University, and it remains part of it. But there they developed Turner leaders, Turnlärare, and those were the ones who were equipped not only to teach gymnastics, but they had to take care of youngsters who twisted their arms or dislocated their arms. It's something I guess you hesitate doing today with litigation being what it was, but if somebody injured themselves on the apparatus, the Turnlehrer was often there to do remediation. As the Turners shrunk in size and wealth wasn't there, that's the reason they eventually turned that education over to IUPU. As Frank had mentioned, the socialist background. This has been labeled, but this is the 1850, and you can see it says Protocol der Socialist Turnverein, and that was the very first meeting in June of 1850. And once again, I'm overwhelmed at the penmanship, and I'm just looking here for what as they list the first row of 36 original members. And the leading list is Sigismund Kaufmann, who was the first president. He was also became the head of the Republican Party in New York. I'm not sure if that's New York City or New York State, but in any case, he was a friend of Lincoln, which became important later in reference to some activities of the Turner Regiment. I think I ought to at least mention to you that it was a socialist Turnverein until 1857. Then it became the Turnverein in the city of New York, but popularly known as the New York Turnverein. The society started back in Orchard Street because the Germans were located. And if you look at the records going back, you'll see that they all lived within a virtual walking distance of the Turn Hall. As the German population moved north, it went up to 4th Street. They built back in the 1872, the 4th Street Turners became their home. They enlarged that and had a fire and restored it, and they stayed there until they built the one in what was then Yorkville, which was then the location of the dominant epicenter of the German population. And that was 1898, and they stayed there until 1983 when we moved to a location which was in the North Bronx, which was owned by the Turners, was the summer home, and they put a permanent facility, very nice facility. In reference to the participation of the Turners in the Civil War, it was, as I mentioned, Siegel who, and I had mentioned to Bill that we actually had some pamphlets that were written by Franz Siegel talking about how to prepare for the inevitable war with the South. And this was 1855-ish. And in it, one of the things I remember reading was that they said, this is how you prepare a breastwork, and this is how you prepare an encampment. And so when the call from Lincoln came in April of '81 for troops, it was in weeks. The Turners had a volunteer group of 1,200 and marched off to war. And they marched off from that 4th Street facility. Reading later, and thanks to Nora Probst, and Nora I'll introduce by saying that thanks to Frank, she was here doing some work for them in reference to a collection they received from a professor from New York University. And Frank recommended her, as she's a Cologne student, to do something in reference to our archives that needed help. Ferdy had done a good start on it, and she then very meticulously went through and prepared the wrappings that you see here, but also did a document, which was this finding aid for archives, and she then did some translation from the early minutes, which was helpful, and then as well as documenting all of the items that are going to be left here. I'm trying to recall. One of the things that I was struck by is that we had a bell that hung across the balcony, and we never knew what the bell was, why it was there. And it was there between the sign that said the New York Turnverein and the symbol Frisch from Stark Troy and Frisch from Fertig Frei, which are the two symbols of the Turners. And it's only recently when we got that translation said that they were down in Hampton Roads, the Turner Regiment, and they wanted to have Indian rubber. Indian rubber, apparently, according to Google, was used for tenting and for protection against the weather. And they requested that, and they said, could you send it quickly, because we're going to be moved from Hampton Roads. And so the Turners, now remember this is before faxes and wireless, received the message, raised the funds, bought the material, sent it down, and they got a thank you along with a bell. And that bell obviously is the one that hung up on the balcony for all that time. But it was amazing to me the speed with which they responded to all of those. And when the Turner ladies, the Damenverein, made the haversacks for the Turners, a whole host of other things that made it easy for them to be early on supporters of Lincoln and the cause. We had to come out here, and we could certainly have, we're no better than UPS, the parcel post or something else. But obviously the documents were meaningful to us, and we wanted to be here to indicate that we were entrusting that to a group that had an equal interest as we do. And so I'm pleased that Frank had pursued retrieving these from the New York Turnverein, and we entrust them to you, and look forward to seeing the product of what might be buried in these records, and hope that they meet your expectations. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.